Please pray with me. Dear God, I just ask that you come into this place and help me to preach. God, if I have written down anything that's worth listening to, open their hearts to hear it. Open their hearts to receive your words this morning. God, give us a hunger to know you more and then satisfy that hunger. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I don't know what to say. Have you ever felt that way? We all know that words are very powerful. As they say, pen is mightier than the sword. But sometimes I just don't know what to say. Words have an incredible potential for our lives. They can build us up. They can lift us higher. They can inspire us to great deeds. They can also tear us apart, ruin our day, destroy our self-esteem, even drive us into depression and anxiety. Words, just the simple manipulation of our vocal cords to express an idea, can shape the very world around us. We all know that words can be powerful. If I've learned anything in the last few months, it's that we want to say things, but we don't always know what to say. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "In the end, it is not the words of our enemies that we remember, it is the silence of our friends." And so we know that we must speak. But I don't know what to say. On social issues, we know that we must speak out. I want to help give my voice, but I don't know what to say. The trouble is, in the world around us, there are so many bad examples of people speaking out in the wrong way. And so that paralyzes us with fear. I don't want to make a mistake like they made a mistake. 2 examples. Number 1, from the news recently, the story of Colin Kaepernick and what's going on with him. For those who don't know, Colin Kaepernick was an NFL all-star quarterback who once upon a time led his team all the way to the Super Bowl. He was a tremendous athlete. But of course, he made the headlines last year when he chose to kneel during the singing of the national anthem. Did you guys hear this story? You see this? Now, see, Colin had been very troubled by some of the reports of police brutality that he had seen, particularly the specific targeting of black individuals by police officers. And so in protest to the institutional racism in our police forces, Colin felt that he could not stand during the national anthem, and he knelt. As a football player on the field, he knelt, and several others joined him. Now, on the one hand, some people praised him for taking such a public stand in a very public arena, for standing up for what he believed in. But on the other hand, people condemned him because he was disrespecting the flag of our country, which stands for so much, and all it stands for. But the story's not over. You see, this year, Colin Kaepernick was a free agent. He didn't sign his contract with the 49ers again. And so this year, he was without a team. And no one hired him. No one, as best I know, as I checked like last week, Colin Kaepernick still doesn't have a job for this fall. He tried to speak out, and now no one wants to hire him. Now, Colin wanted to speak out against an injustice that he saw in the world. He wanted to draw attention to something that was wrong, to something he felt was evil. And I want to take a second this morning and applaud him for that. You know, he wanted to draw attention. If there is injustice in the world, we must speak out. If there is evil in our world, we must speak out. But the question everybody's asking is, did he do it in the right way? Did he make a mistake doing what he did? Did what he do actually change anything? Did it bring awareness? Did it actually do anything? Did he use the wrong method to get his message across? And the question for our lives is, should we still speak out against racism and injustice if it's going to affect our lives, if it's going to affect our jobs? Should we still speak out? Was there a way that Colin Kaepernick could have spoken out against racism? Because let's go ahead and say it, racism is evil. But was there a way that he could have spoken out against it without disrespecting the flag of our country, which stands for a whole lot more than just police forces? I know that I need to say something about this issue, but don't know what to say. Second example. Very recently, have you guys heard about this DACA issue, the DACA? Very recently, President Donald Trump is working to repeal the DAC immigration order. For those who don't know what that is, basically what it comes down to is they're repealing this executive order that protects the children of immigrants who are living in this country and have never committed a crime, and they are working. They are actively employed and contributing to our economy. And so President Trump has given Congress 6 months to create a solution, to get their act together and present us with some reform. And so in response, there's been this storm of outraged people on both sides. I mean, and so the question is, what can we do to show love and support to these children who might get deported to a country they may not even remember? These are the kids of immigrants because of the decisions of their parents. And so if this is a social justice issue about how to treat a foreigner in our country, which it is, then what do we say? How can we respond to this issue? Ezekiel chapter 47 says it very clearly. For the foreigners who have joined you and are raising their families among you, they will be like native-born Israelites to you and will receive an allotment among the tribes. Another translation I have says that they will be as citizens among you. These foreigners are to be given land within the territory of the tribe with whom they now live. I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken. This was the policy 3,000 years ago in the Middle East. And I got a whole stack of scriptures that look just like this. Do not oppress the foreigner in your land. Reach out in love to those who are the alien who lives among you. Extend hospitality to the strangers among you. The Bible, without a doubt, teaches us that we must love immigrants, to extend hospitality. But, of course, we want to find a way to do that that doesn't compromise national security and affect our economy. And we want a practical way to love the strangers among us and maybe stop calling them strangers. On this issue, we can all agree that this issue of immigration reform is very important, and we want to say something. But I'm just not sure what to say. Today is the second sermon in our series called Rise of the Underdog. And each week we are looking at the stories of the underdogs in scriptures to see how God raised them up and how God can raise each of us up. It is time to look in the mirror and discover the underdog within, to realize what we are capable of. Now, last week we looked at the rise of King David, and we saw the useless comparisons, that our world is just full of all these comparisons and how God doesn't actually care about those things and they hold us back. But today, I want to help you find your voice in the world. How do we speak out on sensitive issues? Now, our scripture from today comes from the book of Jeremiah. Now, the prophet Jeremiah will always hold a special place in my heart. Actually, the prophet Jeremiah is my namesake. I'm named after this prophet. When my parents were in the hospital, the nurse asked my parents, what are you going to name the baby? And they said, Sarah. And she said, well, what if it's a boy? Oh, no, we're pretty sure it's going to be a girl. Thanks, guys. And so the nurse, who became a family friend, she actually got to deliver all four, me and my siblings. She got to present me to my mom and dad and say, it's a boy. And so in a bit of a scramble, my dad grabbed his favorite prophet and his favorite gospel. And every kid in my family is named with a first name from the Old Testament and a middle name from the New Testament. It's kind of a nerdy pastor's family habit, which is why my son doesn't have a biblical name. My name is Jeremiah John Manschreck, but of course I go by JJ. Anyways, I digress. Getting back to the biblical Jeremiah, in the Middle East, our story today comes much later in Israel's history. Israel was a mighty kingdom at this point. Now, it was small, but it was strong and it was prosperous. It was doing really well. Israel as a nation was strong, but nearby, just to the north, the Babylonian Empire was growing and it was becoming huge, and they were getting ready to crush Israel. And so God sent these people called prophets. He sent them to warn the people of Israel. And it was a really simple message. Knock it off or they're coming to crush you. Turn away from your sin or they will destroy you. Now, so you can imagine how popular prophets were, right? They had to deliver God's message to the people, and God's message was not exactly happy. Stop everything you're doing and change your ways or you're going to be crushed by another country. And so we open at the beginning of the book, Jeremiah chapter 1, with this incredibly young kid, Jeremiah. Now, we don't know exactly how old he was, but the theory is he was a teenager at most. Some people even think he was as young as 13, maybe 14 years old. And he was the son of a priest. So he's a pastor's kid who was very young when he started his ministry. You see why I feel very good about this namesake. And so in chapter 1, verse 5, the Lord gave me this message. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb, before I set you apart. And before you were born, I set you apart, and I appointed you as my prophet to the nations. Oh, sovereign Lord, I said, I can't speak for you. I am too young. And the Lord replied, don't say that I'm too young, for you must go wherever I send you and say whatever I tell you. And this is what we refer to as the call. The call is that moment in our lives where God puts something in our heart and then he gives it a tug. He puts something, some ministry, something in our life that we're supposed to be doing, and then he pushes us a little bit. He encourages us. Now, I want to take a second and I want to push the limits of this text. I want to expand these words and let them speak into your life this morning, because God didn't just say these words to some teenage kid thousands of years ago. God is speaking these words into your heart right now. He said, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart, and I appointed you as my prophet to the nations. We are called to be a prophetic voice in our culture, a prophetic voice for God, God's voice in the broken world. And then, of course, almost in unison, our hearts cry out, just like Jeremiah's did, whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, sovereign Lord, I can't speak. I don't know what to say. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm not eloquent. I'm too shy. I can't speak. I don't know what to say. And I love the way the Bible phrases it, because it's kind of a ridiculous thing. He says, oh, sovereign Lord. Sovereign meaning all-knowing. Sovereign meaning all-powerful. Sovereign meaning in control. Oh, sovereign Lord, I can't speak. Because what Jeremiah is saying, and what all of us say when we resist God's call, is, hey, all-powerful God, you are not powerful enough to work through me. Do you see how that doesn't even make sense? When we turn to God and say, you cannot work through me, we are saying that you are not powerful enough. Do you believe in a God big enough to work through your life? Oh, sovereign God. God calls us to speak, to be a voice for good in the world, but God's not done. We get to verse 8, and it says in verse 8, and don't be afraid of the people, for I will be with you, and I will protect you. I, the Lord, have spoken. And then the Lord reached out and touched my mouth, and he said, look, I have put my words in your mouth. So what we find here is that our hope, our prayer in this situation is not that we would be super clever, that we would be so smart to come up with eloquent words. No, our prayer is that God will give us the words, right? Our prayer is that God would give us his words. I don't know what to say. That's okay. Your words weren't good enough anyways. Our words lead to brokenness. God's words lead to healing. How many of you have ever hurt somebody in your life with your words? Anybody? Well, the rest of you are lying. How many of us have hurt people with our words? Our words lead to brokenness, but God's words lead to healing. Look, I have put my words in your mouth. And then it continues in verse 10, and it says, today I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some you must uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow. Others you have to build up and plant. You see, this is the job description. This is what we have to do in the world. I have appointed you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. With these powerful words that we have, with this voice that God has given us, we have to tear down systems of oppression and hatred and violence and sexism and racism. We have to eradicate this stuff from the world. Our world is really good at throwing up walls, at throwing up divisions between people based on criteria that don't matter at all. God doesn't care about the divisions of humanity. The world throws up walls, and we need to tear down those walls, tear down these false kingdoms of the world. And then on the other hand, with our words, we get to build up what is good. We get to encourage and work together to build up that which starts with love, the things that bring us closer together, the things that bring us closer to God. I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some you have to tear down. Others you have to build up. It's kind of a huge job that God has given us, and he just kind of lays it on the shoulders of this 13-year-old kid. I mean, it's really overwhelming. And then God follows it, all this giant task, this huge job. He lays it on this 13-year-old kid's shoulder. And then he says, the worst pep talk I have ever seen. In verse 17, he says, this is kind of the end of it. He says, get up and prepare for action. Go out and tell them everything I tell you to say. Don't be afraid of them, or I will make you look foolish in front of them. Wait, hang on a minute. Don't be afraid, or I will make you look foolish? I mean, come on. That's not very nice. What if I'm afraid? And it says, to kind of close out the chapter, the last verse, the last two verses, it says, I'm on the wrong page here. It says, you will stand against the whole land, against the kings, officials, priests, and the people of Judah. They will fight you. Excuse me? They will fight you? I mean, this sounds like a miserable idea. This is not necessarily the kind of job that I am excited to do. I have to do what? I have to stand against the whole land, against the king, against the officials, against the priests, against the people? If we're going to stand up for what is right in this world, sometimes we have to stand up against everyone. Yikes. And then God says, they will fight you. Excuse me? They will do what? I mean, that's like if I had to, get my lawn mowed, right? I really need to mow my lawn, and so maybe I hire an age kid to come over and mow my lawn, right? And it's, come on over, I've got the supplies, I'll even pay you, just go take care of my lawn. By the way, there might be some people who will try to fight you to get the job done. I mean, this is just such a strange thing. They will fight me? This is a terrible pep talk. God lays it all out. He says, yeah, come work for me. You have to tell people something they don't want to hear. Everybody will be mad at you. They won't like you at all, and they will fight you. See you Monday. Oh boy, sign me up. I want to be God's voice in the world and deliver bad news to everybody. Then we get to the end of verse 19 where it says, they will fight you, but they will fail. For I am with you, and I will take care of you. I, the Lord, have spoken. And what we realize is that this is not a pep talk at all. God is just laying out the reality of the situation. This is what the world is going to be like. The world is selfish. And the world is stubborn. And the world is full of anger and hatred and violence. That's just how they are. And here's the worst part. The world is broken, but they do not want to change. They are broken and they do not want to change. And so if we are going to speak up for what is true and what is good and what is right in the world, it is not going to be an easy job. But God is going to be with us, and he's going to take care of us. The good news this morning is that God speaks through us. Now I want to take a second this morning. Think about the power of God's voice. In the beginning of the Bible, the eternal and all-powerful God spoke. And the universe, something happened that was so incredible and so explosive and just radical that scientists literally refer to it as the Big Bang. I mean, that's all they can come up with to describe what happens when the vocal cords of God meet the universe. I mean, it's just explosive. Creation exploded into existence. Through evolution or not, whatever you believe, God created with his voice. How many times did Jesus look at somebody and say, brother, you are healed. Sister, your faith has healed you. Lazarus, come out of that tomb. You're not dead anymore. The voice of God is powerful. It has this incredible creative, healing, miraculous power. Brings people back from the dead. Performed miracles, healed people, raised people from the dead. And yet, with our silence, we have crushed the windpipe of God. We have strangled the healing words that the world needs because of the excuse, I don't know what to say. We have held back because of our fear, because of our desire to fit in, to fade into the background, to not make waves. We have been accomplices to the silencing of God. God's voice is the only voice the world needs for healing. the only voice that could heal the brokenness of this fallen, crumbling world, and we are the bottleneck on God's vocal cords. God speaks through us. Now, on the other hand, there's an incredible potential in your life. If we would just live up to that potential with your words, with your life, there is an incredible potential for God to speak, for God to shout, for God to sing through you. God delights in working through us. God loves to reach out to the lost and the oppressed and the depressed and the broken and the overwhelmed in whispering words of encouragement to a heart full of darkness through you. God wants to work through you. In the beginning, God spoke and the entire universe was created. And then every single time throughout history when God speaks, the universe is never the same. And that same voice, that same power speaks through you. The things that we could do. Through the things we say, the things we do, God speaks through us. God has given you a voice to use in this world for good. Don't limit your voice to what's good for your life. We have been given a voice to use for good, and then God speaks through us. And so our response is very simple. Speak. It's all laid out for Jeremiah. Stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some you have to tear down and overthrow and destroy. Some you have to build up and plant. Simply put, build up what is good and tear down what is evil with your voice. We must use the voice that God has given us as a force for good in the world. And when we don't know what to say, call out to God and ask for his words. Let him touch your lips. Use God's words. Don't rely on your own. I don't know what to say. That's okay. Let God speak through you. Pray for God's words and then speak. You never know what your words might be able to do. Now, little side note, I want to mention that God's voice is intimately connected to action. God spoke and the world was created. God spoke and people were healed. God spoke and the world was never the same again. The physical universe improved. And so God's voice is connected to action. God speaking in our lives necessitates action. For example, there's this trend out there, and it drives me crazy, as particularly on social media with Facebook and things like that. When an issue arises in our culture, so many people have this thing where they feel like they should make a Facebook post, like a big couple paragraph post, or they just rant and rail about an issue, or maybe they find one friend and they just complain and they talk and they talk and they talk. But that's it. Or maybe they'll use one of those special social media filters on their profile picture, right, that says, I support whatever. And then they don't do anything else. They feel like they have contributed to the issue and that's all they need to do. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with a Facebook post. There's nothing wrong with those special filters that affect your profile picture. There's nothing wrong with talking to a person about an issue or complaining or talking about the news. But don't stop there. Don't let that lull you into a sense of false accomplishments. You have to pair your words with real action. If you're going to speak out against the DACA issue, the DACA immigration reform, then we need to be contacting our congressmen and tell them we got 5.5 months left. Get to work, do your job, give us comprehensive immigration reform. If you're going to speak out against police brutality, then what are you doing to make sure that we find racial reconciliation in our community? How's the Ishpeming Police Department doing with these things? I don't even know. Do we really care about these issues? If you're going to use a filter or talk about Houston or Montana or Florida with Irma, what concrete steps are you taking? Do you pray for these people every single day? Because we need to be praying for these people every single day. Have you looked into what their needs are and done anything to send them support? What is UMCOR up to these days? For those who don't know, UMCOR is the United Methodist Committee on Relief. And it's an incredible program because every penny that we donate to UMCOR goes directly to the people in need because the church, the Methodist Church, pays for the administration costs. It's one of the only organizations that has that. We need to complete our words with our actions. You know what? I think we have to do this, don't we? We have to do something about this. So I'll tell you what, I'm not going to do it today because it's a little bit last minute, but next week, next Sunday, we will take a special offering and we're going to send it to UMCOR because we need to pair our words with our actions and we need to start doing something about this Irma Houston situation with all these hurricanes. So next week, we will take a special offering and we're going to send that money to UMCOR. Does that make sense? Is that something we need to do? All right, so it's pretty clear at this point. the inspiration and the example of Jeremiah pushes us to use our voice, to let God speak in the world. We need to tear down evil, build up what is good. We need to match our heart to our voice and our voice to our actions. It's all pretty clear. There's only one question left. How? How do I do that? How do I speak out in the world in the way that is right? I don't know what to say or how to say it, so what can I do? Now, the answer is very simple. We must speak the truth in love. Let me say that again. We must speak the truth in love. Now, there's two parts to this. We must speak the truth. In our lives, how many times have we used white lies or little fibs to get through life, to get avoiding the truth? Because happiness has become more important than whatever is true. But here's the thing, happiness is not the ultimate goal in life. I know, that's like blasphemy in our culture, but it's true. Happiness is not the ultimate goal, at least not the short-term, temporary happiness that comes when we lie to ourselves. True happiness, true joy comes when we are connected to God. Happiness is not the goal. Holiness is the goal. Perfection is the goal. Heaven is the goal. How many times in our lives have we avoided the truth because, well, whatever makes them happy? Right? We'll just let them believe the lie because that's what makes them happy. Whatever makes them happy, or as long as they're happy, who cares? Quiet submission to the path of least resistance is what got us in this mess in the first place. And in the long term, it ends up hurting people. It's actually unloving to avoid the truth, to tell people lies that make them feel better in the short term. We must speak the truth to people. And sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes the truth is convicting. Sometimes it pierces us. The truth drives out falsehood. The truth convicts us and it brings us into the light. It shines a light into places we don't want a light shined. The truth is a hard thing. It's very difficult, but we must speak the truth. We must encourage people to face the reality of the world, even if it is challenging. Actually, that's the most important time to use the truth, right? That's when the truth is the most important, when it is challenging. But there's a second part to that. We must speak the truth in love. You know what? Can we say that together? I need to speak the truth in love. Come on, I need a little participation. Wake up. We're almost done, I promise. I need to speak the truth in love. Thank you. We as a church, we've got this whole nasty history in the church of speaking the truth in hatred and speaking the truth with aggression, speaking the truth out of anger and judgment. But our call as Christians is to speak the truth in love. It is more difficult that way, to be loving when we tell the truth. But that's what we have to do, because that's what we agreed to do when we told God, you get to be in charge. We must be committed to the truth, but our method must be drenched in God's love. Yes, we have to tell the truth, and maybe the truth isn't what they want to hear. Maybe we have to tell them something they don't want to hear, but our method should be so obvious from the way that we speak that our number one priority is to love them. Yes, we speak the truth, but we speak the truth in love. Just like our words need to be attached to action, so the truth needs to be attached to love. Speak the truth in love. I don't know what to say. For every issue that is out there, I don't know enough. I'm not a politician. I don't know all the sides. I'm not sure the best thing to say and the best place and the best way, the best words. I'm just some guy who loves Jesus. And I know that we have to speak. God has given us a voice. God has given us an opportunity to use our voice in his world. And so when God reaches out from heaven and touches our lips, let us take, he says to us, look, I have put my words in your mouth. So let us use those words. So I'll leave you with this. May you tear down evil and build up the good in the world. May you learn to speak the truth in love, and may you find the courage to step up and be the voice of God, the prophetic voice of God out there in the world. Amen.